Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinnie Eastwood Show, broadcasting live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And incidentally, the VinnieEastwoodShow.com, you can listen live on the homepage there. And for those of you who are wanting to listen to archives of the Vinnie Eastwood Show, they are all available at the VinnieEastwoodShow.com. And if you give us a donation or a subscription, or you just want commercial-free archives, just ask, and I'll send you the links. And if you're savvy, you can find them on the homepage there. Anyway, I had somebody criticize me and saying, how come you're giving people who pay money ad-free archives and not the rest of us? Firstly, if I was just giving it to the rest of you, what would be the point in paying? And secondly, I do anyway. and the reason why people donate me money is because I do what very few other people can: give a platform to really interesting perspectives from people all over the world on all spectrums of discourse. If that's a crime, I'm sorry, but I'm freaking guilty. And my very special guest is Rosemary Guiley, and we're talking about the Djinn. And before we got onto the break, we were talking about the slightly benevolent, well, in fact, rather than benevolent, just sort of like benign half of the spectrum there. And you were just about to start explaining the malevolent side of the spectrum.
Well, that's right. That the ones that we're interacting with are a very skewed portion of the Djinn population, because not all Djinn are hostile to us, but the ones we're interacting with the most are, and they have been able to cause us significant problems over the centuries. And I do believe that they have a major presence in the ET abduction scenario, which is probably one of their latest fronts of activity. And they insinuate themselves in among the other entities who we're dealing with. I do not rule out that we have engagements with a variety of entities who have varying motives. But the Djinn are very good at looking for opportunities. They are fundamentally opportunists who look for the best way to accomplish their objectives. And since they are masterful shapeshifters by sliding around and hiding in other kinds of entity encounter experiences, so much for the better for them. We don't really know that they're there.
So they're very mysterious and difficult to track down. And this is something that I was talking about a couple of years ago when I first started hearing about these alleged reptilian entities. And I was like, well, there's so many people who are like special forces and so on and so forth that have come into the truth movement since then, who believe in that kind of thing. So why don't they just try and capture one? If you believe in it that much, why don't you track one down and capture it, put it on display for the world to see? How difficult would it be to capture an entity like a Djinn, though, who's basically made of smoke and can shapeshift into anything it wants?
It's probably more difficult than we might think. Now, I've been told by a number of sources that I've consulted over the years that there are efforts to capture these entities and that there are government interests that are very involved in this. I have no firsthand knowledge of that myself. These are the kind of conspiracy theories that do circulate around, and there may be some merit there to some of them. To me, personally, it would be surprising if we didn't have an interest in trying to track one down, especially if they have these kinds of motives and these kinds of abilities. In magic, the Djinn can be summoned and contained, and in fact, if you read the Middle Eastern press, there are accounts almost every day of sorcerers who say they are capturing the Djinn into vessels in order to exorcise them from people and places. Every week I get emails from people who want to know whether they should buy objects that are supposed to house Djinn. And they seem to think that these Djinn are going to be their personal servants. I don't think it works out that way, if you get the genuine article to begin with. But I believe that they make themselves visible to us when they choose, not when we choose. and that they have the upper hand most of the time when they choose to interact with someone in a very involved way. They do seem to be disturbed by certain kinds of electrical and EMF energies. And sometimes people find that simple things like turning lights on or leaving televisions on at night, computers and that sort of thing, will repel or dampen the activity. But like a lot of things out there that are predatory, they can build up resistance to those tactics as well.
So if you're going to protect yourself from one of these entities, I mean, how would you know that one of them's even onto you? What are people's experiences like?
They happen in a variety of ways, and in fact, sometimes it's hard to distinguish Djinn from entities that we call demons, who also are very predatory and oppress people and become involved in possession cases. But with the Djinn, there are some patterns of behavior that are likely to tip their hand. One is that the pestering of people is in a multitude of ways. People are distracted on a variety of fronts. There's this apparition and that form. There are different kinds of apparitional forms around. There are black shadows. There are nightmares. There's wasting away of health and bad luck and things of that sort. It seems like there's a lot of activity going on in many different forms, and people often think that there are entities responsible for each one of those, when in fact it might be just a single being, a single Djinn. They are very self-directed. They have self-centered interests. It's like, what's in it for them? They're not serving any spiritual purpose of trying to do us in on a soul level. I think some of them will, but unlike the demons of Christian lore, they operate on their own. They have free will, and so they're looking for opportunities that are going to further their own interests.
As the French would say, they have a certain je ne sais quoi.
Well, absolutely, and it can take the form of religious and spiritual battles. Sometimes that is the battleground, but in those cases, they're often, in our culture, masquerading as something demonic. Sometimes they respond to religious exorcisms, and every faith has techniques for dealing with unwanted spirit presences, and they all work. But with the Djinn, not all of them work all the time in every case. I think that they are some of the hardest beings to get rid of. And every time I interview people about their experiences and I talk to other experts on the Djinn, they all say the same thing. Avoid these beings because, once you're dealing with them, they are extremely difficult to get rid of.
Are they the kind of dangerous things? I saw this film not too long ago. A recent film came out where this kid can see ghosts and demonic entities. He can see things before they happen. And there's this one type of demon that crawls around all over the place. And if they ever notice that you're watching them, if they ever notice that you're aware of them, they come after you big time, and you're pretty much dead. Is that kind of what we're talking about here? Once the Djinn know that you're aware of them or you can see them?
Awareness in the spirit world, too, and with other entities. And, yes, some of them who are the higher level beings, the ones that are more intelligent, more interested in manipulating or having some sort of invasive interaction with us, once they see that you notice them, you're on their radar, and that can be very problematic for some people. You don't ever get off that radar.
Have there any stories that you've seen of people actually vanquishing one of these entities, banishing them?
I have. I've been involved in what I call persistent negative hauntings here in America, and these are cases that, if I can, I follow them for a long period of time. And the longest one I followed ran about 3 years. And we've had situations where we've tried a variety of remedies. Now, I'm not an exorcist, but I will work with people who do those kinds of procedures and consult on that and recommend things. We've tried a variety of things, and the entity seems to go away for a while, and then it's back. I've had other cases where remedies have worked seemingly for the long haul. And again, it's finding something that this entity seems to respond to. So sometimes the remedies are very simple. And for example, in the Djinn connection, I have a case from the Midwest where a young man had an attached Djinn. And this was one of these amorous connections where the Djinn who become infatuated like that with human beings, they attach themselves to people if they can, and then they start interfering in that person's other relationships because they want the person all to themselves. And he finally was able to get some relief by using a very ancient remedy, the Seal of Solomon, which is an amulet based on the magical lore of King Solomon and his ability to command all the spirits in the spirit world. And he used this amulet like a shield at night because he was being pestered a lot at night. And that worked the trick. He had tried other things. He'd tried willpower, keeping the lights on, keeping the television on. There are lots of kinds of folk remedies that are supposed to diminish their ability to manifest and to have power. And nothing would work for very long, but this seems to have had a long-term remedy. Now, I do hasten to add that what we might consider long-term, even a half a lifetime or a lifetime, may still not mean that the entity has gone away because they don't live on time scales like human beings, and an entire human life is nothing from their perspective. So if they're interested in an area, some of them...
Well, hold on. How do you know that? I mean, have people communed with the Djinn and obtained sort of like ancient knowledge from them or something like that? Are they very old? What?
This is old folklore about them, yes. And, some of the original sources are lost in legend. They get passed on down through the years. And there are people who have had communications with the Djinn and get information. By and large, when they're interested in having interaction with people that they don't want the human beings to know very much of what's going on, they don't communicate very much. And if they do, it's to convey their displeasure with people. But yes, we have a variety of sources on the communication. So they are said to live for very long lifespans that in human equivalent would be into the thousands of years. So if they go away for a few decades by the human count, it really doesn't necessarily mean that they've gone away for good. But we have to look at it from our perspective in terms of do we have relief from a troubling situation? And if it lasts for a long time or even indefinitely for us, then we consider that to be a permanent solution.
Mm. In terms of communication with these entities, has anybody actually tried to make contact, and what happened?
Oh, a lot of people try to make contact, and an astounding number of people want to make contact for the purpose of conjuring them to make a deal, to ask for favors, because they think these beings are some sort of, sources of goodies out there that are going to do them endless favors, and that's not the case. If the Djinn do anything for people, there is always an exchange. They will ask for something in return. And in a Faustian kind of way, it's usually not very good for the people in the long run. Other people have been curious about communications in the cases that I've followed over the years the negative hauntings, I have always attempted communication through a variety of ways. We've done seances, mediumship, real-time EVP, passive EVP, and sometimes they will communicate, but it's usually pretty terse and often very hostile. It consists of messages like, I was here first, I don't like you, go away, or I'm going to make you miserable until you do, things of that sort. Now, there are people who have had...
Rosemary, I'm sorry, we're coming into break again. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen, with Rosemary Guiley. In fact, rather than benevolent, just sort of like benign, half of the spectrum there. And you were just about to start explaining the malevolent side of the spectrum.
Well, that's right. That the ones that we're interacting with are a very skewed.
Not the rest of us. Firstly, if I was just giving it to the rest of you, what would be the point in paying? And secondly, I do anyway. and the reason why people donate me money is because I do what very few other people can: give a platform to really interesting perspectives from people available at thevinnieeastwoodshow.com. And if you give us a donation or a subscription, or you just want commercial-free archives, just ask, and I'll send you the links. And if you're savvy, you can find them on the homepage there. Anyway, I had somebody criticize me and saying, how come you're giving people who pay money ad-free archives all over the world on all spectrums of discourse? If that's a crime, I'm sorry, but I'm freaking guilty. And my very special guest is Rosemary Guiley, and we're talking about the Djinn. And before we got onto the break, we were talking about the slightly benevolent. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinnie Eastwood Show, broadcasting live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And incidentally, the VinnieEastwoodShow.com, you can listen live on the homepage there. And for those of you who are wanting to listen to archives of the Vinnie Eastwood Show, they are all available